Greetings, true believers. It is I, Matt from Hidden Machine, here with a video game review. But before we get into it, I want to say a quick thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. Even $1 a month helps us out big time. It goes a long way. So if you like the channel, you want to throw us a few bones, hey, we appreciate it, and it really does help us out quite a bit when it comes to doing what we do. But enough of the plugs, let's get into my review. For today, it is a game called Cookie Cutter. I want to take you back to June of 2023. I was watching a Summer Game Fest live stream, which I always want to call the Summer Games Fest, but that's wrong. Anyway, the stream had a trailer for a game called Cookie Cutter. I was chatting online with some other folks who were also watching the stream, and the consensus on the trailer was, it's a little weird, but intriguing. Well, the combat did look appealing. The thing that I couldn't get away from focusing on was that the protagonist was constantly flashing their underwear. She's wearing this little skirt that keeps flying up, and although the panties have a rather modest cut, it still came off as kinda too horny to me. But recently, we received a review copy of Cookie Cutter, and 23 hours of gameplay later, I am happy to report that the game is really good, and it's also only moderately horny. Now, I'm not usually too good with Metroidvania games. I've restarted Axiom Verge a dozen times, and I just keep getting lost. And I honestly did not enjoy Hollow Knight at all. I've had fun with games like Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, and Carrion, but even though I beat both of those games, I still felt pretty lost and confused a lot of the time. I'm telling you all this to give you an idea of where I'm coming from when I say that Cookie Cutter was one of the better new releases that I played in 2023. The game is a stylish beat-em-up that is densely packed with great animations, weapon variety, secrets, references, and overall, I just think the game is really damn good. The story takes place in an alternate future where people were sold on the idea of living forever through a process that puts their soul into a mechanical body called a denzel. It came to pass that these denzels were actually more like prisons for souls, and people inside of them were enslaved, forced to serve an aristocracy that is currently led by a Marilyn Manson lookalike named Salem Garbanzos. He heads up a megacorporation called Infonet that has taken over the world in Cookie Cutter. Dr. Shinji Fallon is a former Infonet engineer who constructed her own denzel in an attempt to learn the secrets behind the source of Infonet's power. This denzel was different from the others that she had worked on before, and she named it Cherry. This act of creation turned into a rather sapphic experience that was brutally cut short when Infonet discovered what Dr. Fallon had been working on. Salem Garbanzos and his team of dickheads captured Dr. Fallon and attempted to kill Cherry. And those enemies are actually called dickheads due to their phallic shape. But anyway, Cherry survived this attack and was restored to working order by an engineer named Raz, who was a friend of Dr. Shinji, and that's where the game really starts. Cherry, along with her talking vagina named Regina, is on a journey that sees her building up strength and attempting to find her creator while she takes down Infonet. What ensues is a Metroidvania-style adventure that takes place over 8 distinct areas, with a sort of hub world connecting them all. As you progress, you find new abilities, you use those abilities to access new areas and further your progression. It follows the Metroidvania formula pretty closely, but where I think Cookie Cutter really stands out is in the combat and the overall visual presentation. I'm not very good with parrying attacks, which is why I've had to cheese my way through Elden Ring and why I haven't beaten any games like Dark Souls or Blasphemous. Cookie Cutter does have a parry system, but thankfully, it's completely optional. The combat here is welcoming to button mashers like me, but if you're someone who is inclined to taking a more tactical approach, the game has options for you as well. That isn't to say that you can get by on button mashing alone. If you're not good with parrying, you're gonna have to learn how to dodge, dash, and stack your attacks proficiently. Thankfully, the difficulty of the combat in Cookie Cutter progresses in such a gradual manner that I don't think you'll ever be totally overwhelmed by it. There are definitely some especially difficult combat encounters, but you'll always have, a good grip on the skills that you need to get through those encounters. In general, I found that the game does a great job of introducing new ideas and mechanics in a really accessible way that also lent itself to giving the game a really solid sense of progression, and I always felt like I was being rewarded for moving further and learning new techniques. You have access to a bunch of different weapons and abilities that can be swapped out on the fly. While they generally all just work to defeat your enemies, each one really does feel distinct in its own ways, and I think that players will naturally find combinations that work best for them. I never felt like any particular option was over or underpowered, they just each did their own thing, and I believe that they can all be effectively used depending on your playstyle. On the visual end of things, Cookie Cutter does some very unique stuff. While I've seen some of the character designs compared to stuff like Scott Pilgrim, I think that as a whole, the game has a pretty unique look. Obviously, there's the whole sexual angle. There's boobs, butt plugs, and horny puns all over the game, but it never feels too horny for its own good. I've reviewed a handful of adult games here on the channel, and I've found that it's common for sexual humor and lusty imagery to totally overshadow the gameplay and writing for many titles. Thankfully, that is not the case in Cookie Cutter. The game is overtly sexual, but it's also aggressively violent, and it makes plenty of attempts at humor. The game really feels unapologetic about its mishmash of influences and aspirations, and it's full of references to music, movies, and other games that I'm assuming have had a direct influence on the developers, if not the game itself. The whole thing feels very punk rock to me in the general aesthetics, but also in the sort of attitude that I feel emanating from the game. It's weird, it's very fucked up and often uncomfortable in some ways, and that all comes together in a package that feels very complete and confident to me. I did run into a few minor bugs along the way, mostly having to do with the camera. You can use the right analog stick to look up and down a bit, and there were a few areas where the camera would just freak out when I tried to move it. This happened maybe 3 or 4 times throughout the entire game, and thankfully it never kept me from progressing. That said, the game is receiving regular updates, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was patched out before too long. I also encountered a few areas that were extremely frustrating to navigate, but this was because they required precision platforming, and they were entirely optional areas that wound up giving some really great rewards once I got through them. I'm always hesitant to put a number or letter grade on a game in a review, but I would definitely recommend Cookie Cutter to anyone who enjoys platformers, beat-em-ups, or Metroidvania type games. Cookie Cutter has a very strong sense of style that really complements the gameplay. The animations are very fluid and really fun to see, and there's unique animations for every mega kill you do with all the weapons, and I made up that term mega kill, but there's a lot of cool stuff to discover here. I never minded going back through areas that I had already traversed because navigation and combat in this game just feel very fun and fluid, and it's a blast just to play the game. The developers have been teasing some new additions to the game, things like full voice acting and some new weapons, and I'm very excited to see how that all plays out, but in the meantime, they've got a really solid game on their hands. The game is currently available on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, as well as Steam and the Epic Games Store. So there you have it. That is my thoughts on Cookie Cutter. I'm curious, have you played this game? Have you seen the trailers? Were you watching this one at all? Like I said, saw it over the summer and I was real skeptical, but man, I got sucked right into this game and played through it over the course of a week or so, got through pretty much everything the game had to offer. I didn't quite 100% it, but it seems like there are more updates on the horizon, so it's probably going to be something that I revisit once they add a bit more into the game, but this is not early access, this is not incomplete, this game is a total package, so to speak. Anyway, thanks again for watching, we'll see you in the next video. Peace. And also, I think it's very funny, I've got my kettlebell and my exercise bike here as if I'm really fit. They're just in there right now. That's not supposed to be any sort of subtle code. I'm trying to look at my monitor to put my hand on it. Never mind. Peace.